I'm hearing laughter, so peer bonding appears to be happening. Okay, we're going to get started with this session. We have a sponsor for this session, which is Sub-Zero Group West, and I'd like to introduce Randy Vaughn, who's the president of Sub-Zero Group West, to make a few remarks. Randy, please come to the stage.
Thank you very much. I know I'm the only thing holding you between happy hour, so I will try to make this very brief. And we're gonna dumb this down now, talk about the high-tech world of appliances. So as a sponsor, they allowed me about 10 minutes to go over just a brief history of what Sub-Zero is and what the company is, so I thought I'd do that. Nothing detailed. We're here at the show. This is our first time at this show, so we're really excited over the next few days to meet a lot of you. I don't know any integrators. We know a lot of architects and designers and builders, but we don't know anything about integration. So those integrators, you can go to sleep for a few minutes. Sub-Zero is a privately held company. We're a third-generation family-owned business based out of Madison, Wisconsin. We have manufacturing facilities both in Madison and Goodyear, Arizona, which is just a little suburb of the Phoenix market. We've been in business. Last year we celebrated our 70th anniversary, so we've been in business 70 years as a privately held company, which is very unusual at this time in day. And how we got started was our original founder had diabetes, and he was looking for a way to store his insulin. And so he, with a 7th grade education, invented his own refrigeration system and stored insulin in the times that he was in the summer where there wasn't refrigeration. In Madison, Wisconsin, you can put the stuff outside in the wintertime, but in the summertime, you can't do that. His name was Westy Bakke, and in the 30s, Frank Lloyd Wright hired Westy Bakke to try to help him integrate refrigeration into some of Frank's personal homes. So that was his first adventure into the architecture business. And then in the 50s, Westy had been producing a lot of commercial refrigeration for schools and hospitals and restaurants, etc., but he decided that he was going to get into the home business, and so in the 1950s, he developed the first built-in style cabinet depth refrigerator for the home. And that was a big invention at the time. And then over the years, in the 90s, we were the very first company that introduced and manufactured a refrigerator that you could hide into your cabinetry. So that's called an integrated refrigeration. So those integrators, we have a refrigeration that will fit to your prop. So integrated refrigeration, we invented that category. We have more SKUs in integrated refrigeration as well as built-in refrigeration than any other manufacturer in the marketplace. But one thing our current president discovered is we couldn't survive as a company just being a refrigeration company. So around year 2000, Jim Bakke, who was Westy Bakke's great-grandson, purchased the company in Compton, California called Wolf Commercial. And Wolf has a very long heritage in the commercial restaurant business, and so they had started building residential Wolf ranges for the home. And so Jim, at the time, purchased the residential division of Wolf, and so since the year 2000, we've been manufacturing Wolf residential ranges, wall ovens, cooktops, coffee systems. We have all sorts of things now for the home. So, and then over the last 2 years, the nice thing about being a privately held company as well is we were able to go through the very difficult 2007, 2008, 2009, and Jim reinvested in the company with R&D, new manufacturing facilities, and so over the last 2 years, we've rolled out more than 180 new SKUs to the marketplace, which many companies, when it gets tough, they just tighten everything up, and they're driving a P&L. Well, Jim, fortunately for us, didn't have to do that, so he kept reinvesting in the company, and now as the business has rolled back, we have more product offerings than anybody in our segment of the business. An example of that is a new dishwasher line that we will launch at the end of this year. In 2017, we're going to introduce a brand called Cove, and Cove will complement the rest of our brands. So Wolf is set up specific for cooking, Sub-Zero is set up for refrigeration, and Cove will be our first entry into the wet products, dishwashers. So we couldn't have done that had we not have the patience of Jim Bakke. We started that project almost 8 years ago, built a brand new facility in Richmond, Kentucky, bought a $5 million tub tool, put it in that plant, and the economy crashed. So we literally sat on the plant, we sat on the tub tool and didn't produce a single thing up until about 3 years ago when we ramped the project back up. So for the last 12 months, we've had this product out in consumers' homes, testing it, making sure it works, and at the end of this year, we will launch that product to the marketplace. And again, we would not have been able to do that if we were not a privately held company. So some of you may be asking yourself, what the hell is an appliance company doing here at the TecHomeX show? We're not a company that really builds a lot of the latest and greatest gadgets to the marketplace, but what we do very well at is try to innovate our products. And some of the things that we do and we have to do is most of our products we build to last consumers up to 20 years. So we have to have a timeless design in that regard. So we can't make something today that 5 years from now is going to look bad in a consumer's home. They're spending upwards of $10,000 to $15,000 on a refrigerator and a range. And so that product has to last and look good a long time. What you will not see from us is a refrigerator with a TV on the front of it or a tablet on the front of it. While that may be cool today, I guarantee there's not a single person in this room that has a tablet they've owned for 10 years or a PC that they've owned for 20 years or a phone that they've owned for 5 years. So as we build things to last a long time, we also have to be cognizant of what we're putting on that and putting in it. So our ideas of innovation and how we tie to the tech side of it is through integration in other systems such as maybe home automation of Crestron or Control4. We have a system today in both our refrigeration line as well as our wall oven line that you can incorporate that into a home automation system and control your refrigerator from your home automation system, your Control4, your Crestron pad. Now, what you want to do with your refrigerator on that home pad, I have no idea. You can turn your ice maker off, you can put it into vacation mode, but the more interactive things are around the cooking side of it, where you could actually be out in the backyard and have your pad go off to say, hey, your oven's preheated or your roast is done in the oven. So those are the cool parts. Refrigeration, not as cool, pardon the pun there. The last thing I want to comment on, we have a little bit of a new app coming out, and it's in our booth. The thing that we are showing in our booth, it's an app that would be a phone-based or tablet-based app that you would be able to turn your oven on. So if you're driving home from work and you want to preheat the oven, you'll be able to go onto your app, kick the oven on, preheat the oven, so when you get home, you can stick the roast in and it will be done in 25 to 30 minutes. You can also set your meat probe. So there's a probe in every one of our products, so you can put that in there. It will register the internal temperature of whatever you're cooking on the inside. You can see all of that. You can set timers on the app, so it would allow you to see when the product is going to be done or the food is going to be done. So it's more finding out what's useful and what a consumer would use versus the bells and whistles of what somebody sees on a showroom floor. The other side of this particular app will be around the service diagnostic side. For us, satisfying a customer who has a service issue on a $10,000 refrigerator is super important to us. And the quicker we can get the service company out there, diagnose the product, have the part available, and get them out of the house, the more satisfied that customer is going to be. So with this new system and the new app, the idea would be we could diagnose the product prior to ever showing up in the consumer's home to find out that you have a cooling fan down in your refrigerator. So now the tech, when he goes out to the house, he brings the cooling fan with him, replaces it right there. within 24 to 48 hours, you have a customer who had a problem, we satisfied it in a timely manner and solved their issues. If we can help them with time, efficiency, money, make life easier for them, that is how we see innovation, not through TVs and monitors on the front of the product. Okay? Thank you guys very much. Enjoy the rest of the show. We'll see you on the floor.
And I blew the introduction. It's Randy Warner, not Randy Vaughn. Randy, thank you so much. That was great to have a talk without slides, but we're going to have some great slides now. Panel, come on up. Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
Welcome to our session on, this is a lot of syllables for 4 words, residential infrastructure and interoperability update. So 2 4-syllable words and 1 8-syllable word.
You counting?
I am. I did
right,
count.
There you go.
So our goal is to help you understand the constantly evolving tech infrastructure and interoperability landscape, the myths and realities of interoperability, and practical strategies for implementing products that work together effectively. We've had a lot of discussion about this topic already. Hopefully there'll be some answers provided over the course of this hour or so. I'm John Galante. I'm moderating. You're sick of me by now. I'm sick of me by now.
I'm sick of you by
I'm
now.
a little sick of you too, though.
Man.
Mitch Klein, who sponsored a previous session, will be talking about the interoperability side of things, followed by J.B. Fowler with Luxul. Luxul is a manufacturer of sophisticated, principally wireless networking gear. It's part of the Legrand family of companies. And then Patrick Hagerman, pretty freshly with Domots, also has a track record in the California installation and integration business. We'll be cleaning things up. And then hopefully we're going to get to some Q&A with the audience as well, if we're efficient in getting through our slides. So that's the flow, and I'm going to turn it over to Mitch for interoperability.
Okay.
8 syllables.
Just going to grab my water for a second. Yep, it's me again. Hopefully, most of you will remember some of the things that I talked about this morning. And now we're going to focus a little bit more deeply on this concept of interoperability. I think we will all agree that that is, in fact, that's the Holy Grail. This is what we're in it for. This is what we want. There are certain realities behind it. Let's define it first. And we can define it as the ability of a system or a product to work with other systems or products without special effort on the part of the customer. Okay? And I stress that part, the special effort, because everyone says, oh, yeah, you can work with our product. And the reality is we can work with it. How many integrators are in this room right now? You guys can work with anything, right? Okay? You're the ones putting in the special effort. So, 2 things. Interoperability is about choice, perhaps as an architect, perhaps as a designer, but more importantly as a consumer. And interoperability is about an ecosystem. The image up there is the same image I showed this morning, which shows we've got 450 member companies that believe that interoperability is about choice and about ecosystem. And you can read that list yourself when you come down to our booth later. Parks Associates, who's well known for doing a lot of research into this area of smart home and related topics, came to this conclusion in a whole lot of paperwork and a whole lot of words that interoperability is a competitive advantage. Duh. Anyway, you can read the text, but basically, yes. And Alarm.com, who's one of our members and an exhibitor here and a participant and certainly an organization to watch carefully, they determined also that interoperability is about ease of use. And you remember the slide I showed you earlier with all the different apps. Everyone's got an app. Just because you got a lot of apps, and by the way, if you've got an iPhone, you can put them in folders, so that really improves ease of use if you can find the folder. Anyway, I won't get into that. Much to my shock, 88% of homeowners would rather prefer a single app. Can you imagine that? So why is this so hard? Why is this a holy grail that we can't get? Let me put a little context behind it. Anyone ever heard of this Internet of Things? Yeah, no one? Okay. Everything is Internet of Things. Internet of Things, that's smart cities, that's smart industry, smart travel, smart cars, smart people, smart homes, you name it, smart travel, smart airplanes. Matter of fact, it's not Internet of Things, it's Internet of everything. And actually, it's not even about the internet, because you don't need the internet for all this smart stuff. So you know what? It's just about things, or actually it's about everything. Again, more context. Just take a look at this one slide done by, I believe it was Markets and Markets. It's a lot of numbers on here. Let's take a look at where we are right now. Today, there's 28.4 billion things in this Internet of Things. By 2020, there's going to be 50.1 billion things, if you believe that number. I think that number's small, to be honest with you. Okay, let's look at it a different way. By the year 2020, which, by the way, just for point of reference, that's less than 3 years from now, so that's not even the future. 4 billion connected people, $4 trillion in revenue opportunity, 25 million apps, all on my phone. 25 billion embedded intelligent systems, 50 trillion gigabyte of data. I mean, you can run these numbers any way you want. The bottom line is this is why there's so much confusion. Because the opportunity is so enormous, and there are so many companies that want to have a piece of it. That's why there's so much confusion. Let's look at it another way.
Can you go back?
There we go.
Can you do a Dr. Evil imitation for us?
50 billion.
Because you did a good, it's a good visual of you looking like Dr. Evil there. Just
Took me a while to find the ring, but I got it.
50 trillion.
Wow, these numbers are big. So there you go. That's the quick overview. Take a look at that. This is a chart that some guy on the internet put together. It's far from complete. I'm not even going to ask you to look at it, but this was the Internet of Things landscape. Yeah, there's a landscape, guys. And it's an Internet of Things landscape, or as I say, it's just everything, 2016. Let's pull up just the home piece of it. And again, far from complete list of companies, but you can see certain categories that this particular individual put together. Now, okay, let me bring it back home again, all right? So I just wanted to give you an idea and a context on why this interoperability is such a challenge. Let's just look at one section called protocols. Yikes. And every one of these protocols has a reason for existence, and every one of them has financing behind them, and every one of them wants to be the interoperable protocol. You following with me at this point? Get the challenge? So let's just kind of move on, and let's take a look at where some of this challenge is, and I'm going to really geek you guys out right now. And we're going to talk about the software stack, because within any particular platform, there's a stack and a bunch of bits and bytes and sections within it. Typically, a program will tell you there's 7 layers. I'm only going to look at 3 of them right now, and actually, we're really going to take a look at 2. And I just want to explain it. Give me a second here. The physical layer is just simply how it connects to things. Let's not bother with that right now. Let's take a look at the 2 critical points and where all the differences occur in transport and application. And some of you integrators, you've probably heard this term thrown about, the application layer. Well, what is all this stuff? I'm going to oversimplify it. Let's look at email. We all have email. Email is the transport layer, as in my example here. Email can be sent from any device. It can go from a smartphone to a computer, from a computer to a smartphone, to a tablet, to any device. That transport layer has been defined, and we all know we can use email. It's never a question. Now let's look at what happens at the application layer in my example here. In the application layer, I receive this email from one of my staff. Way too many words, I've talked to them about that, but the point is they all fit. And I get this email from my transport layer, and I open it up in the application layer, and I can actually read this email, no problem. But the very next email I get is this one. What the heck? So in reality, I have no idea what to do with it, so what do? I ignore it. This is the challenge in the application layer. If the application layer is defined, I'm going to be able to read, I should point up there, I'm going to be able to read that email. But the application layer is not defined in my example. And this is one of the challenges in why we're having interoperability. Does that make sense? Good example? Okay. Moving right along, let's talk about some of the popular transport layers that we read about in press releases and we see logos on a lot of devices. And let me address them one at a time, just again, to give you a basis of understanding, and sorry to geek it all out, but I'll try and keep it simple. Wi-Fi is ubiquitous. We all have it. We have it on every device. We have it on smartphones, tablets, computers. We have wireless access points everywhere. It's very high bandwidth. What does that mean? High bandwidth means it's perfect for streaming, video, high-resolution video even, audio, perfect for that. It's also extremely power hungry. How many of you are very happy with the battery life in your smartphones? I mean, I get people say, wow, mine lasted all day. I mean, that's good? Well, but unfortunately, that's the reality behind Wi-Fi. Okay, we can't fix that simply. It also operates at a frequency we'll refer to as 2.4 gigahertz. It's an extremely congested transport layer. It's extremely congested frequency. Let's take a look at Bluetooth. Also ubiquitous. We all have it on our phones. Bluetooth was developed to be short range. It was developed to be able to use an earbud while you're communicating on your smartphone. That's what it was developed for. It's developed to be point-to-point. It does its job very, very well, and that's all it's for. It's been expanded to be able to communicate and stream music from your device to a Bluetooth radio or a Bluetooth speaker. How many have done that before? Is that okay when a phone call comes in? Or when you're listening to music and all of a sudden you get bing? Oh, I got an email, okay? So it's a point-to-point, single use. Yes, they're in development. If you read press releases, God bless. But yes, they're in development some new things, but proof's in the pudding. Also operating.
What is the word, why is it called Bluetooth? It's a Norwegian king.
Oh, is it?
And was it Ericsson or?
Wow, was Ericsson?
Ericsson. It was named after him. It was a catchy name.
I got to write that down.
Yeah.
That's a good piece of trivia. I like that.
He's with Z-Wave.
Okay.
Operates at 2.4 gig. Okay. Thread group. Google has the ability to get everyone's attention, and they've got their attention with this thing called Thread. It's a competing standard with Zigbee and with others, and also operates in the highly congested 2.4 gigahertz frequency range. There's Zigbee, the other Z, the red Zigbee, not the blue Z-Wave, but the red Zigbee. It's an open standard, operates at 2.4 gig, and as a matter of fact, the nice thing about Zigbee is it is a purpose-built platform, so it's being used for smart meters, for remote controls, for many, many things. Interoperability is not something it's built for. And if you want to debate that, be happy to take that offline, but that's not what it's been built for. And then there's us, there's Z-Wave. Also a defined standard, and operates, at a whole different frequency at 900 megahertz. So just very quickly, 2.4 gig is a very, very small frequency. It doesn't travel all that well within the home. Integrators, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because when you try to deploy your wireless access points in the home, you have a lot of challenges trying to get the different parts within the house. It's just not designed to operate in a home. 900 megahertz, if you can remember cordless phones, which is essentially in that frequency, you could walk around the house with your cordless phone, if anyone actually ever buys them anymore. So anyway, enough on that. Let's get into the application layer, because I'm going to run out of time in a second. And I think this is where the more poignant points are going to be made regarding this holy grail of interoperability. Wi-Fi. There's no interoperable protocol. It's a transport layer device, that's all. Anyone buys Wi-Fi devices in the home, there's some user intervention required in order to make it work with some other things. It can do it, but it's not designed to be interoperable. Bluetooth, Well, they claim it's in development. Keep reading the press releases and crossing your fingers. But I would say, in the words of one of our top engineers, good luck. Thread Group just said, hell with it, we're not going to define it. So Thread is strictly all about getting from point A to point B. Yeah, you do your own application layer. So they just said, heck with it, we're not even interested in that. And then with Zigbee, the question is which Zigbee? And way back when I was with another company developing products, and I directed our engineering team to deploy Zigbee, they kept coming back and going, which Zigbee? And I kept going, Zigbee. I didn't get it. I get it now. There's a lot of different profiles. With Z-Wave, it's a clearly defined command class, tight certification requirements. As a matter of fact, I've done presentations to developer groups before, and I've told them point blank, if you want to do something proprietary, go somewhere else. That's not what we do. We do interoperable. So that's where we are with application layer. Now that I've painted this somewhat dismal picture, let me make things a little bit better, because there's this thing called a gateway or a hub or whatever you want to call it. And these gateways and hubs are putting lots of different radios in them, and they're attempting to define ways for Wi-Fi to communicate with Zigbee, to communicate with Bluetooth. Z-Wave has a Z-Wave over IP layer, which gives the ability to be controlled via the cloud, via a Wi-Fi device. And all these other groups are looking towards this third-party device or gateway. So some examples, you've got dedicated gateways. Many of you have heard of SmartThings or Nexia. Security panels have these gateways built into them, some of them from Honeywell and ADT. If you take a look, ADT is here, I believe. You can talk with them about it. Control systems are also doing that with Control4 and URC. Service providers are doing it, as well as wildcards. Who knows what HomeKit's going to do? I wish I could make an announcement. They won't let me. Stay tuned. Google Home, can't make announcements with that either, but let's just say everyone wants an ecosystem, and we have one. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Anyway, moving right along. User interfaces are also critical. So some of these devices are strictly focused on the smartphone or the tablet, which are very convenient devices, but really very inconvenient devices at exactly the same time. You really want to pull out your smartphone when you get home in order to unlock your door. Probably not. Okay. So when it comes to user interfaces, integrators are always faced with the reality they got to do all these. And voice, of course, being one of the more top-of-mind, most highly visible user interface these days. But no, there's no one of these that is the right one. It's every one of those that is the right one. And then there are the interfaces you don't think about. As a matter of fact, the ones that are really not interfacing at all. Things that are going to be done automatically. And this is also something to be considered with an ecosystem. Smartwatches, smart cars. What kind of intelligence will be built into the cars? These are devices that are interfaces, but they're passive interfaces. They're automated. Sensors, some very cool, innovative devices, and what I like to call biotechs or biotechnology, which you're seeing a lot of that in athletic wear, but that's also going to be part of things that consumers are going to be buying. Anyway, moving right along. So we've got decisions to make. As integrators, as architects, as designers, builders, what do we want to use? We want to go with the brands and relationships we have? Well, that's what we do. Viability, long-term, short-term, what are those brands? Not always the startups. Some of the startups are very disruptive and they're fabulous products, but what is their likelihood to be there? As our friend talked about from Sub-Zero, will they be here 20 years from now to be able to support you? What are the customer preferences? And then the key, support. So that said, I think I can hand you back.
Hand it to
This
JB.
way.
Thank you. So I know that what most of you want to see here is a fight between Mitch and myself, because I think it'd be really good. I definitely come from the Wi-Fi segment. Luxel is a networking company. We build routers, we build switches, we build wireless access points, all for the CEDIA channel, the residential home automation, security markets. And frankly, we have a pretty top-notch product, I feel we do. I think a lot of the integrators that are in this room have probably heard of us, have probably used us and tried us.
One of the things that we definitely spend our time on is making it easy to use. That being said, I didn't come here to sell you a product. What I really wanted to talk about, and I talked to John a little bit about this before the presentation, is really getting an understanding of who you guys are, what it is you do, who the audience is, and I tried to cater a message that speaks to you. One of the things, as I sat through the conversations earlier today, is you guys have touched on a lot of the points that are in my slides here. So some of this will be a reiteration. The gentleman from Huntington Beach at table 22, kudos, right? A lot of the things that you said are issues that come up to me all the time. There he is, no longer at 22. So you'll see some of those themes come across in my shorter presentation. One of the things that, again, I talked to John about that I think is important is getting to the point where you guys can ask us some questions and talk about what it is manufacturers like Domots and myself are doing, and then even some of the silicon providers and the network providers. Obviously, the slide you've all seen, this is really to talk about who is our customer. You guys know this in your industry. You know who your customer is. I can't reiterate enough, knowing your customer is extremely important. For Luxel, we've made a big play saying that the integrators are our customers. They're the ones that are installing our equipment. They know it best. They know all of the challenges that Mitch talked about. There's no doubt, and it was brought up in the very first presentation, there's been this transformation of TV. We've gone from rabbit ears to coax to satellite, and quite frankly, you hear about people cutting the cords and using Roku and Apple TV to do streaming. It's just the way the industry is going. Phone technology have changed. How many times do people actually stop using their POTS line, right? The plain old telephone system, and they've gone to just their cell phone, or they're using voice over IP through their internet service provider, things like Skype and Vonage and Ooma. So the industry's changing. One thing I will touch base on before I go to the next slide, and I hope you all enjoyed the Dilbert. I'm a fan of him. Internet service providers are changing. We're going from wired internet service providers, whether it's coax, to now there's questions about should I go to fiber? Should I go to 5G? I mean, 5G is actually providing enough bandwidth to satisfy a lot of homeowners today. So it's an interesting question. It's things that integrators, builders, architects all need to be aware of. If I'm going to do something like put 5G into a home, or if I need to have one of my customers leverage that, there's an infrastructure that has to be put in place inside the home to be able to leverage that. And I can assure you, using things like Cat5 is probably not the right thing to do, and I'm sure some of you integrators agree with that. Security systems, another thing that really has changed over the last several years. A lot of integrators deal with security. It's a good thing to have. Homeowners want it. I would argue that our customers, one of the big things that they do care about, I mean, besides the home theater like we talked about earlier, is the fact that they want a secure home. They want to know that their house is safe and secure. One of the comments that I often get from guys who are installing home automation systems, whether it's Control4 or Savant or Crestron, or you name the company that's doing it, when they have a custom button like a good night button, they love that. Because when the homeowner pushes that, it takes a whole bunch of different systems in the house, ties them together, and it kind of locks down that house. It's something to consider as integrators and think about as home builders and what is of value. In order for you guys to get there, you all have to work together. I love Pulp Fiction, kind of a crazy movie. The funny thing is, and Mitch, you set me up perfectly for this, right? Say the Internet of Things one more time, right? So we always talk about the Internet of Things, and Mitch, you set me up perfectly. I completely agree. There's so many different things out there that is the Internet of Things. Even Legrand, our parent company, has this Elliott initiative, electrical IoT. They don't necessarily know what the hell this thing is, but they know they gotta have it, right? There was a Carl's Jr. commercial a while back where, a beautiful lady, I'll keep names out of it, she was sitting on a car saying, I don't know what 1080p is, but I know I gotta have it. Well, that's where we are with Internet of Things now. Everybody needs to do that. The question we have that I ask as a manufacturer is, who is this really benefiting? Is it the customer? I would argue that it's actually the manufacturers. I would argue that as home builders, you guys get some leverage to the Internet of Things. If you can more statistically know your customer based on products that they have or things that they are connected to, I think you can make really intelligent decisions. Are we there yet? No. but it's going that way, and I think it's important to recognize that. So there's this notion of a smart home, and I have to give a plug to Sub-Zero and Wolf, of course, because when they're sponsoring our thing, I'm sure that they will have a device on here one day that is connected. We saw it with Control4, with what they were doing there, and I agree, do you really need to know when the refrigerator light's on or off? Well, probably if you're Jewish and you have a Sabbath issue, yes, but there's a lot of things going on here. Mitch already took my thunder here. There's tens of billions of devices. He showed the actual graph. Quite frankly, to think that there's going to be upwards of 7 connected devices for every person in this world is kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy thought, but it's going that way, and we'll see it. And again, the question you have to ask yourself is, who is this really for? Who does this benefit? But there's reasons for doing these things. So that being said, there's all these different products that are out there that are creating what I call point solutions, right? We talked about it in the terms of apps. You have a thermostat, well, you have an app. You have a light, Philips Hue here is this example. You have an app for that, right? Ring doorbell, they're here today. They've got an app for that. There's a lot of different apps that are out there. Yes, the DIY type of person can go install those things and they can get a lot of fun saying that they have a connected home, but it's just that, it's a connected home. I would argue that it's not necessarily a smart home. Then come the solution providers. These are the guys that are taking these different types of products that are out there, or they're creating their own products, leveraging technologies like Z-Wave or other devices, creating their own set of gateways and hubs that Mitch talked about, and putting them together. I think Control4, Savant, larger jobs that do Crestron, AMX, those are all guys that all of the integrators in here know, they use them, they have a choice for whatever reason. The reality is that those guys are all bringing this Internet of Things together. Now we have to start talking about services. So some of the folks that are here as well, alarm.com, we can't forget Alexa. Everybody knows this voice control thing that's going on in this phenomena. Google has their hub. These are the types of services that I would argue that are out there making a difference with respect to products, with respect to the different solution providers that are out there. Talking to the integrators in the room, you know the challenge that you have with all this. The reality is that each one of these are starting to converge. They're starting to bring their services together. Control4 is starting to work with Alexa. You have all these different point solutions that people create drivers for. And quite frankly, and this was brought up in one of the other sessions, I call it this convergence to confusion because people don't know what to do. It's a lot of different products that are out there. People know they want it, but they don't know what it is. And it's important to recognize that when we talk about the next 2 slides. I should say 3 slides. So I brought this up because part of my section was talking about infrastructure, to wire or not to wire. And I'm sure my little Lego Hamlet there probably 500 years ago cared more about whether he needed to exist or not. But today, people are asking questions like, hey, do we wire this house? Do we worry about that? Everything's going wireless. The reality is, and Patrick and I were having a really good conversation about this, in order to build a solid wireless infrastructure in the home, you need to make sure you have solid wires that are inside that infrastructure. A comment was made earlier that the ISP, using the router and that wireless access point that the ISP provides, that isn't going to cut it for you. It's going to be able to handle 5, 10 devices. Yes, it will work. But if you need to build out a smart home or what people expect to have as a connected home, you're going to have to put in solid products. Okay? Luxel, right? Just so we're all clear on that. Yeah, I had to throw that in there.
I would use it.
Yeah. Discussions, and again, my Huntington Beach friend here, talking about Cat 5, I agree. Cat 5's not a good choice. Fortunately, for what I see as most of the people in this room, and a lot of the discussions we've had today, we're talking about the $1 million homes. Cat 6, Cat 7 is actually, I'm going to say pretty cheap, but if you're a production builder, you want to get into where you're building 400, 500, even 2,000 homes a year. In conversations that I've had, they are penny pinchers, and they are very concerned about, an extra 10 cents per foot on a piece of cable. Fine, I understand that. That is a challenge. The thing you guys need to do is understand your customer. It follows back to that very first point that I make. Who's your customer? Why do they need what they need? How can you help them in the future? A production home build-out is very different than a custom home build-out, If you're a custom home builder, yeah, think about fiber, because I hate the word future-proof because nothing is future-proof anymore, but having something that will help scale in the future is of value, and you need to apply that in this situation. That's primarily what I wanted to say on this particular slide. The tools of the trade, and man, I appreciated the last conversation and the breakout where you guys were all talking, because you said this exact issue. Builders definitely have their electrical contractors, they definitely have their plumbing contractors, they have their carpenters, they have their carpenters. It's not unreasonable in this day and age to consider the fact that you also need an integrator. That integrator is the AV expert. He's the guy that's going to be there to help the consumer of the home, right, the builder's customer, actually take all their different products and bring it together. That's what they need. They're also going to be the ones that are there for in the future when Apple TV 5 or iPhone 27, whatever comes out next, needs to get connected to that network. They're going to be the ones that can help them. When that customer's Wi-Fi password changes or it's hacked or whatever, we've talked a lot about security issues here, it's that integrator who needs to be there to really help for that. And that's how I view this particular slide. So as a builder, I want you guys thinking of that. So what does this mean? First off, on the left picture, clearly there are builders building beautiful houses. This is probably dawn, not sunset, because I know builders like to work in the morning, right? And there's some foreman that's just watching him. I don't know exactly what he's looking at there, but he's doing something, right? My point of having this slide is to remind the builders that we need to know who our customers are. And with all of the challenges that Mitch talked about, that you've heard about today, make sure you find the right integrator that meets your needs. If you're going to be a production builder, look at an integrator that can build packages for you. I appreciate John's slide at the very beginning of the session where he showed a lot of the stats. I like the fact that 66 to 69% of those people want to have a strong network. That says that I'm in the right business. I can totally appreciate that. I think it's important for you guys to understand and get with the integrators very early on to understand where it's appropriate to run Cat 6, where it's appropriate to put Wi-Fi access points to build out the stronger network. Create packages that help scale. I think that's an important takeaway from my conversation here with you guys on what it is that builders need to be thinking about. On the right picture is really about the integrators. I really view them holding up puzzle pieces again in the sunset and thinking of wonderful things. But the reality is that this is an extremely complex world. Whether they hold it up to the sun or not, that's their business. But taking all these different pieces and putting them together is where they have a lot of expertise. And I'm not saying anything that you didn't talk about already, but it's important that integrators, builders, architects are all working together. In fact, at a lunch conversation that we had, we were talking about the fact that there'll be different types of light switches. You'll have a Decora light switch sitting right next to a toggle light switch. Probably a bad idea for a $2 million home. It's a bad idea for any home as far as I'm concerned. Integrators also, you guys need to be thinking, one of your takeaways, and I didn't talk a lot about this, but I know that Patrick's going to talk about this, is consider how you guys can start to sell your services more. The last thing a builder wants to do is be tied to a network that may or may not go down. That's where you guys come in and sell your value. Things like remote management, things like helping if it's a parents or family with parental controls, those are all critical things that you guys can do. Be thinking about that value. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
All right, so assume that we haven't scared you away already and that you've actually not thrown in the towel, but in fact have installed a network, have built out whatever protocol, whatever infrastructure that you've chosen to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about post-homeowner move-in support. And I heard that brought up earlier. That's one of the big issues is, gone are the days where we can sort of put something in and just walk away, right? These are becoming very complex systems. They need constant care and feeding. And by that, I mean you've got to constantly be looking at firmware and reconfiguration and all the issues around that. But I'm going to take those numbers that we started at, 50 billion IoT devices in the next 3 years, I think it was, and bring that all the way down to the single residence. So right now, on average, 25 to 30 IP-enabled devices on the network is not uncommon. And in fact, we're seeing 50, 60, and 70 fairly regularly these days. If you believe Gartner research, by 2022, we'll have 500 IP-enabled devices in every house. So now you see how we get to 50 billion when you start adding cities and everything else. But you take just the regular residents and you put 500 IP-enabled devices. Boy, you think it's complicated now, right? This is getting harder before it gets easier. So to that end, as we talk about post-move-in homeowner support, who's going to do that, right? As a builder, is that something that you want to do? I'd argue probably not. As JB said, as an integrator, that's right in your wheelhouse, right? This is what integrators do. So as builders, you've got to look and figure out who it is you're going to rely on to do this post-move-in support. This care and feeding, right? This is a constant issue around firmware updates. And I heard somebody talk earlier about these involuntary firmware updates that happen. And in an isolated case, yeah, they work great, but all of a sudden that interoperability might go away because they've changed something that the other device wasn't expecting to see. So we've got all this stuff going on a network that largely could be out of our control. It becomes incredibly complex. And oh, by the way, it's one of the most critical utilities in the house these days. Right? I used to ask homeowners all the time, if your toilet plugs up and overflows or your internet connection goes down, which is a bigger deal? And without fail, it was always, when the internet connection goes down, my house comes to a grinding halt. My kids are on my ass. My wife can't get stuff done. I can't get stuff done. Homework doesn't get done. Everybody's got an excuse of why I can't pay bills. Literally the household these days just comes to a grinding halt. So to that end, not only are we marrying complexity and adding to that complexity on a daily basis, we're also, the critical nature of this thing continues to go up, right? So it's this crazy sort of convergence of where things are going. The other thing that we're starting to see is this idea that, there's DIY, right? You can go on Amazon and buy a whole lot of stuff that we put into connected homes and smart homes these days. But the reality is, if you think back, in the 50s and 60s, everybody changed oil in their car. It's just what you did. And as cars became more and more complex, finally got to the point where literally nobody changes the oil in their car, right? It's a crazy thing. You can go find somebody else to do it for $29, and you just have them do it. So we're starting to see this movement from DIY, which basically is I'm going to try to stitch all these components together and make some kind of system out of it, into the do-it-for-me crowd, right? And ultimately, do-it-for-me means I get it, I want the smart home, I want the connected home, but I still need some help, right? And when we get to 500 of these devices in our house, you can guarantee that people are going to start needing help with that. So we see that at Domotes as a huge revenue opportunity, right? Because there aren't that many companies out there that are providing that level 1 phone support or chat or text or by whatever means to take care of that customer, right? You've got this customer who now has this house. You've built them a beautiful house. We've installed a network that's really solid. You've put in, as an integrator, you've put in all kinds of smart home stuff. As a builder, you've commissioned packages of things to go in these houses. But somebody's got to support this afterwards. And so, we'll talk a little bit more about it as we go, but we see this as this huge opportunity because there's nothing better than staying in touch with your customer, right? When you can have those constant touch points with your homeowner, good things happen. So how do you do this in a way that's managed and manageable, right? Whether you're the integrator or you're the builder who decides to take this on themselves, right? There's a lot of builders now that are looking at kind of this through-the-line support service. So not only do they feel the need for differentiation to sell a smart home package, but they might have some post-homeowner move-in support. They might have a service program. They might have an aftercare program. So I've talked to some builders who say, I'll just take care of that. Well, make sure you know what that means, because that's not an insignificant undertaking. And whoever does it, you've got to have some kind of service level agreement, which basically says, here's what I'm going to do for you, right? So at the end of the day, when you look at this stuff you put in and you hand it off and you trained and you've provided warranty support for a package of things that have been put in the house, but what about 6 months later when the homeowner does go to Amazon and they buy their Alexa Echo and they buy all the things that start connecting off of this and they kind of start the duct tape and baling wire of adding things into their network? How do you support that, right? Is that on you to support now that you've provided this package? Or do you have some kind of an as-built, an electronic digital as-built that says, well, this is what was on the network when we handed it over to you. Everything else after that, maybe it's an incremental charge, or maybe it's an all-you-can-eat package that's on a monthly basis. But one way or the other, you have to acknowledge the fact that these are not static objects anymore. These are dynamic. People are adding things all the time. And in some cases, homeowners are the things are being added to them, right? They buy a new washing machine, and all of a sudden it's online, or a dishwasher, or whatever the appliance might be. Now, as the integrator or the home builder, what's your responsibility to support that, right? So those are things to consider as these things come onto the network. Who's responsible for it, and how do you know when it showed up, right? Because what we do know about these systems is sometimes the symptom isn't the problem, right? What do you hear from the homeowner? I can't get to the internet, or Netflix doesn't work, or the TV isn't working the way it should. Well, that probably isn't the TV or Netflix. It might be part of the network system, or it might be a different device that's having a problem on the network and it's flooding the network with some kind of a network storm. So the symptom isn't always the problem, and the symptom may in fact come from, or the problem may in fact come from something they've added to the network, not you added to the network. So these service level agreements are a big deal. So make sure whatever you do from a support standpoint, you look at a service level agreement. Elephant in the room, right? Security and cybersecurity. So now you've decided to put in this fancy network, and what we do know for sure is that clients, at least today, are willing to trade off security for convenience, right? There's an awful lot of homeowners out there who certainly don't understand best practices in how to maintain their network, upgrade firmware, change user IDs and passwords, and so on and so forth. And so there's this trade-off of, well, I want to be able to control things, or I want to get to it remotely from outside the house, so just open a port. Do things, port forwarding, all kinds of crazy things. And if you remember it, or if you heard about mid last year, there was what they call a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack that happened primarily in the US, but most of the Western world. And what it turned out to be was 100,000 IoT devices, right? A lot of surveillance cameras, a whole bunch of things in residences, that a bot was sent around the internet, and it found all these open ports and found all these user IDs and passwords that were left at default, and basically embedded a little bot, which then went back and flooded one of the DNS servers, which ultimately took down about a third of the commercial internet in the world and about half or more of it in the US, right? So that didn't take much, and that was all caused by people not adhering to best practices, right? You simply had all these IoT devices. So this cybersecurity thing is not insignificant. So when you embark on this, and integrators know this really well, as a builder, as you embark on this, be thinking about the downsides. I mean, as much as we all can't wait for all this to happen, by the same token, there are some responsibilities that we have to make sure that we are doing it the right way. So as you look at network systems, as you look at installers and integrators, if you're using somebody, and a lot of builders are typically used to using somebody they've used for a long time, it may be their electrician, it may be their security provider who's doing their low voltage work, really make sure they understand networks, because they now are going to be responsible for managing that network, right? So it's a really big deal, all the way to the extent of, as a builder, as the integrator, what do you guys have for contracts? What is your indemnification policy? What if something does go wrong? What if they become part of that DDoS attack? Do you have contracts that are really solid that give you at least some hope for indemnification if things go wrong? And unfortunately, it might not be if, but rather when. So be careful on that one. The good news in all this is there are these tools and services being provided now, because everybody sitting up here has been through all of this and every aspect of this. And so we all see these opportunities, and we're looking at how do we service this growing consumer need, right? You guys as builders in the high volume space are looking at 400, 1,000, 5,000 homes over the course of the year, and we know that you're getting pull from your consumer. Your prospective buyer is saying, I'd like some smart home stuff, I'd like some connected home stuff, I certainly want to move into a home that's wired appropriately. So we're starting to find that there are companies out there that are now packaging things, and I heard there's a few conversations earlier about this idea that if we package things together, it makes them simpler, it makes them more reliable, it certainly makes it easier to maintain, right? If we know what the devices are across those 400 homes, we've got a much better shot at doing firmware upgrades in the appropriate time, et cetera, et cetera. So the more you can standardize on things, especially in the high volume space, if you can standardize on stuff and you can get these packages, and we're starting to see providers literally go from design all the way through warranty and aftercare support and everything in between. And for a builder, that's got to be refreshing, because it's not leaving you holding a piece of the puzzle, right? You can literally go to somebody and get a complete turnkey service. So I would encourage you to talk to your integrator and help them, as a builder, help them look across that entire breadth of things that are going to need to happen in this house once you get all these smart home devices and all these networks installed. At Domot's, one of the things that we've got is a little box that goes on the network. And one of the things that that little box does is it immediately scans every device, every IP-enabled device on the network, and now even some that aren't IP-enabled. And we take an immediate inventory of every single network device that exists. And because of that, we can then enhance it with more data, and we can give you a much better sense of what's on that network today. So we almost give you a real-time as-built of what's on that network the minute you hand it over. As an integrator or service provider, managed service provider, you can also then look at it, you can log into things remotely, and you can make changes. So without having to go to the house and without having to leave ports open, you can log in remotely and you can reconfigure devices, you can power cycle devices, you can look at the status, you can see performance issues on the devices. So you get a pretty good view of what's going on in the house without having to roll a truck to go out to the client's house every time. So now magnify that across 400 homes in a community or 1,000 homes in a community. And whoever the service provider is can now see a dashboard that gives every single network on that that you're managing, and you get a status. You get red, yellow, and green. And so you know, red means something's down, yellow means we've got performance issues, and green, everything is fine. So we'll give you a dashboard that literally you can look down and see the instant status. Again, as a service provider, let's deal with the things that are having performance issues or broken and not worry about all the things that are actually working the way they should. Same with disaster recovery, right? It's going to happen at some point. Something is going to go south, and you're going to need to get firmware back up to date. You're going to need to get backups done. So we've got some systems, and as do other people, that give you this view into the network from a remote standpoint. It gives you proactive notification, which we believe is really important. Again, a client or a homeowner with 500 IP-enabled devices typically doesn't even know that something went offline half the time, right? So the example I use all the time is, I've got 2 kids, right? They should have done their homework and printed it out the night before, but inevitably at 7:50 a.m. in the morning, they're trying to hit print, and it turns out I can't get to the printer and they can't get to the printer. Well, had I known about it 2 days ago when it actually went offline, I probably could have fixed it. And now it's a fire drill and we're all running around like crazy people. So this proactive notification on something as simple as, hey, look, your printer went offline. Well, that's important. I can go fix it now and not let it be a fire drill later. So now imagine all the way out to things like thermostats and wireless access points and things that inevitably will go offline. So we give you that ability to see things proactively, and as a service provider to the end user, whoever the homeowner might be, what a great service. To be able to actually tell them ahead of them knowing that, hey, we see your printer's offline. Would you like us to fix it for you? So a lot of opportunity around how we actually start providing service to these homeowners in a way that we've never had to do, frankly, but really we should be able to use this opportunity and provide service to them in a way that we've never been able to do. So we see it as a gigantic opportunity. At the same time, it's not easy, right? As JB said, pick your integrator correctly, use a good integrator. It's really important because this continues to get harder before it gets easier. That's it.
Cool. Questions from the audience? There's a lot of stuff there. There has to be something that you're unclear on or that you're questioning. We've got folks in the back of the room and on the side of the room with mics. All right, I'm going to go.
We
Do it. Yeah, we
I
need
think
you to be prepared.
isn't it happy hour?
We answered all the questions. Where's my next beer coming from?
You answered a lot of questions. So I think that I want to make sure that it's coming through clearly to the audience that what's happening with what they call in the IT world remote monitoring and management. So there's the network side of this, right? JB, that's really kind of Luxul's space. And then there's the device side of this with the control side captured. I mean, maybe you guys can take turns serially and talk about what's going on there, because I do think that's important. It is about quality of service after the move-in, and that's the crazy ant in the basement, right? In home technology is we do have a lot of dissatisfied customers after the initial installation because we have not tended to that post-installation customer experience well. And now we've got some technologies that give us the promise of being able to do that economically because we can know what's going on. We can maybe do some fixes remotely without rolling a truck. And even if we do roll a truck, we've got a better idea of what we're going in to fix there. So let's make sure we're clear on what those capabilities are that have arrived.
Go first.
Yeah, I'll be happy to take that one. Yeah, so imagine, again, this idea that you now have an entire inventory instantly and constantly of what's on the network, right? Whether it's network hardware or it's subsystems or it's devices or it's control systems, really doesn't matter. It can be your IT devices or it can be your smart home devices. The world now kind of gets wrapped under this umbrella of just IoT, right? We've stopped differentiating between IT and smart home or connected home. And so, what we look at is everything that's got an IP address becomes fair game. And we work very closely with Luxol, and we have agents that are embedded into their hardware, in fact. So when you put a Luxol device on the network, it goes out and it scans, if it's the right Luxol device and we happen to have an agent on it, it goes out and it scans every device on the network. We have a product that we're getting literally 1 million scans a day out in the world, and that all goes into a database. So we have about almost 2.25 billion devices in this database now that we know about. So not only can we scan the IP address and get the MAC address of the devices on the network, we can enhance that data with the fact that, look, it's a Samsung TV, not a Samsung tablet, or it's a Apple iPad, not an Apple TV. So we start knowing a lot more about these devices. And working with Luxol, we sit right at the front end of that network. And so we sit in the router and we start knowing things about what's happening on the network. We can look at performance issues, we can look at round tripping time, we can look at jitter and latency and all kinds of different issues around that. We also can provide parental controls. We can do notification if a new device comes on the network that you haven't seen before. We can start looking at proximity. There's just a whole myriad of things that we can do. In addition to, when you do see a problem, you can log in remotely. And so gone are the days of having to set up VPNs and do all these very sophisticated networking things that most people in your office would have no idea what to do with, right? You end up having very expensive techs who understand how to do some of this sophisticated network work in order to look at the forensics of what happened in that house. Now we can take almost an office admin person and allow them to look, and if it's green, yellow, or red, if it's yellow, they can log in remotely and they don't need to know any of the protocols, they don't need to know how to work with any of it. So we've put it down to a common layer that's much simpler to use.
And we're fixing stuff for folks remotely.
We are fixing stuff remotely, right? Because at the end of the day, they don't want us in their house and we don't want to be in their house, and it's very expensive to roll a truck, and if we can do it without having to be there, it's a win-win for everybody.
So I clearly stated at the beginning that knowing your customer is really important. I also stated that Luxol's customers really are the integrators, and a lot of the things that we're doing in our products are making it easier for the integrators to install. It's exactly why we partnered with a company like Domotz to integrate that technology into our products. We think it's the right thing to do, and it helps this industry. So that's my statement as to what Luxol is doing. Yes, we have a lot of different switches and access points that has capabilities that Domotz can take advantage of, and it's the way we're going. One thing that Patrick didn't talk about, which I think is important to understand for a lot of your customers, and again, somewhat of this is me hypothesizing, some of it is actual discussions with several integrators. You mentioned do-it-for-me type customers, and I think a lot of the do-it-for-me customers were DIYs that really couldn't make it happen, right? You guys know who I'm talking about. You have those sets of customers, and maybe they couldn't get their 6 Sonos Play 5s integrated properly, and you guys were asked to come in and do it. What's interesting, and one thing that I think that Domotz did, which is really intelligent, is they provided the integrators with an app, yet another app, right? But an app that you can provide to your customers that if they need to power cycle the TV, right? The TV's not working, you can go hit a little button here that will power cycle that device and hopefully fix it prior to you getting a call. I think those types of things for that set of customers is actually very important as well. We all know that the guys that have the $10 million homes that are willing to pay $3,000 a year for a contract for you to fix it for them probably isn't going to use that app. But there's definitely a set of people that think they're technologists, right? Much more the millennial type of crowd that will do that and will use that app, and I think it's a really good play.
Great, we've got a question.
So wait, this can't
No,
go
we don't
unanswered.
hear.
This can't go unanswered, and I totally agree with you guys. This is absolutely critical. There's more than one network in the house, and so I would challenge anyone to explain to me why every device that is communicating should be and should have an IP address. The answer is no, not everything should have an IP address. Should everything be accessible? Yes, I would agree with that statement. But every device should not have an IP address. And when we talk about networks, clearly the IP, the Ethernet, the Wi-Fi is the most visible, the most used network in the home. Totally agreement with you guys. But it's not the only network in the home. And I just wanted to make that point before we get into other questions.
Can I add
point.
just
And
one
you're-
thing to that before you ask the question?
And your diagnostic tool is starting to provide some of that remote
Correct.
visibility to control networks that may not be IP-based.
And with our diagnostic tool, which you can come and see, it will actually let the integrator know before they leave the home where they may have some potential exposure. And unlike what happens in Wi-Fi and Ethernet, where the more devices you have on the network, the more burden it places on the network. In our platform, the more devices, the better, the stronger it gets. So you can actually see with this device, this tool that we put out, where you may want to add a few more devices just to simply create more pathways for effective and trouble-free communication.
Cool.
Thanks.
This question's for JB. My name's David Rodarte. I'm with Rava, but I've been in the consumer electronics industry for about 3 decades. Lived through this high-performance smart home that I have. I had a tremendous problem with all my systems, and I brought in the Luxol product, which is fantastic. But I know you know. Well, but wait a minute. It
Oh,
could be
okay, there's more. There's
anybody's
more.
equipment.
No, just stop there.
You can hear a butt.
But I
Turn
think
the
it
mic
would
off.
benefit builders and designers to understand about the service of prioritization
Oh,
of
absolutely.
devices and what that means, because again, that contributes to a home not operating properly, and there's a choice with premium equipment that you can do the service for prioritization.
It's a very, very valid point, and I appreciate the comment, and I'm glad that our gear's working out for you. Again, I'm going to reiterate, integrators, guys who are installing this equipment, start to understand this, but to Mitch's point, there's a lot of devices on the network. There are some devices that require higher priority than others, and when an integrator or when let's call it the DIY person, the consumer comes in and starts adding lots of Wi-Fi devices. I mean, I know I probably have 30 different Wi-Fi devices just between my 2 kids and my wife and I, and it can clog the network. You have to start to be smart. You have to start taking your VoIP systems, if there's one in the house, start putting that at higher priority. In the technical terms, it's called quality of service. There are reasons that you will go into a managed switch and use a managed switch, use a higher end product besides the one you can buy at Best Buy, and have an integrator come in and tune it to the home. I think it's an important aspect. Another thing that I'll talk about regarding quality, and I didn't really touch on this because Mitch talked a lot about the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum being so crowded, and he's exactly right. Wi-Fi has 2.4, it also has a 5 gigahertz range that some of you have heard about, but it doesn't have the distance. But when you start to add in Bluetooth, you start to add in the 802.15.4, which is Thread and Zigbee and Weave and all these other terms that you hear out there and Mitch alluded to, those are also in 2.4. Making sure that you're not overlapping channels, making sure that your Wi-Fi access points are on channel 11 while your Zigbee devices are down on channel 3 or whatever it needs to be, it's appropriate. And another thing, this is yet another reason I've seen this happen, especially in production home communities where people are throwing up 400 home houses, I mean, almost literally throwing them up, 400 unit communities, I should say. They'll start to install a lot of smart devices. What they don't realize is that the Wi-Fi access point in home number 1 starts to affect the house that's in home number 2, 3, and 4 down the street. Those are, again, reasons that you need an integrator that you work with to understand those challenges. Because if you sold them on that technology package and all of a sudden house number 2 is frustrated, they're coming back to you guys, right? Making sure you have the right builder in place or the right integrator in place is a good thing.
Okay, so it's a wired, and wireless world out there, and you need help sorting it all out. But there's a lot of new functionality that's has promise to really improve that post-occupancy experience, and that's exciting. So we've reached the end of this segment. Let's hear it for our panel. And let's hear it for those cool Sub-Zero products that you guys are all going to check out at Randy Warner's booth.